Jake Paul versus Mike Perry. Did we get a show? Depends who you ask, guys. Everyone is sick and tired to a certain extent of Jake Paul calling out these guys who are not legitimate boxers. And what I mean by that is that they're just not boxers, right? Because we're talking about combat athletes as a whole. We have one of the best in Anderson Silva, a legend of the sport of mixed martial arts, Nate Diaz, Tyron Woodley, one of the best welterweights to live in the UFC, Mike Perry, a successful UFC fighter, but he moves on and sees his real calling in BKFC, where it's street brawling and cutting each other up and seeing who has more grit. He's successful there. But at no point in time have we seen Jake Paul fight a boxer. Well, we did, Tommy Fury, and he lost that fight. But now we're at a point where we're stuck between, man, is this guy a legit boxer, or is he just really good at making his calls, the gimmick fights? Here's my opinion. I think Jake Paul, as I've said before, is dedicated to the sport. You got to give him that, right? It is a little easier because it's not like he has a full-time job. He has his, his little company, sponsorships, media, things to do. But at the end of the day, all of his funds could be allocated to nutrition and the best boxing coaches, and he has all the time in the world. So I think Jake Paul as a boxer progresses faster than a normal guy who's just at a boxing gym, right? Because I think he has the money. I think he has the time. I think he has the resources. So Jake Paul, being a name and, already, has chosen the route to just call out big names to give us gimmick fights. In this process, we've seen a little more legitimacy in opponent, because he went from Nate Robinson, then Ben Askren, two guys who have no reason to be in a boxing ring. Then he goes into Tyron Woodley, Anderson Silva, Nate Diaz, guys who were like, okay, these guys are scrappy. When you see Anderson Silva, you say he's older. Tyron Woodley, he declined. Nate Diaz, he's older. But now we get to someone like Mike Perry, and we realize he's not a boxer, but we say, man, this guy's violent. Man, this guy does damage in BKFC. Oh, man, he's going to walk him down. He's going to do this. And what happened? He walked him down, had no head movement, thought this was like BKFC where you're just going to cut somebody up or break their face with your knuckles, and the ref's going to call it. It wasn't that. It was boxing. It was straight up boxing. And Jake Paul has learned to box. Jake Paul has now been boxing for years, where these other guys are coming in, getting a quick boxing training camp, and then coming in and just being fed. Now, some people say it's rigged. Who knows? I don't. But to a certain point, I start to give Jake Paul credit as an athlete. And I think that's what we all need to do. We need to give him respect as an athlete. As a boxer, not so much. But we have to understand that Jake Paul, unless he wants to be a boxing champion, WBO or something like that, which I don't think he does. I think we understand that. He wants to make a payday, make a name, have the fame, the ego, all that. But if he has a trajectory where he's fighting good amateur boxers, then low-level pros, then mediocre pros, and this, that, the other, we're not really watching Jake Paul. He's just kind of this sideline boxer, and his name just becomes nothing. So he's taking the route of fame, fortune, but then we're all not taking him seriously. But my question is, when do we start taking him seriously? And I guess the answer is when you start fighting pro boxers. And I don't know if that ever comes. So I think Jake Paul, we have to be okay with him bringing some attention to boxing in his own way, being a part of gimmick fights, bringing up random names we wouldn't think of, right? And now he's going to fight an old Mike Tyson, a real boxer, but then the excuse is he's old as hell, which I agree with. But at some point in time, we got to give him some respect. And after the Mike Perry fight, I start saying, man, this guy is a combat athlete. And I hate to say it, but I think it's the truth. And I made a video about this and posted it on Instagram. But one day I really do think that Jake Paul is going to make enough of a name for himself where he fights Conor McGregor. I think Conor McGregor is going to see enough of a payday or excitement, or that Jake Paul's getting enough hoopla, and then he's going to fall for the trap, because all it is a trap. Because every fighter's at home watching Jake Paul take out their colleagues in a way, or someone they've seen fight, or someone they respect as a combat athlete, and they're saying, what the hell? I could beat this guy. He just beat Mike Perry, but I could beat him. He beat Silva, but I could beat him. And Conor McGregor's going to fall into that trap one day, and I think they're going to make a huge fight. Now, yesterday, Jake Paul called out Alex Pereira. I think it was genius as well, because Alex Pereira gave him the attention because Alex Pereira knows the money involved there. But we know Dana White's not going to let Alex Pereira fight him. That'll never happen. Anyone under UFC contract will never fight Jake Paul. Better yet, will never fight in boxing. We know that. So I think that's silly. And we know it's silly because that'll be the first time that Jake Paul fights someone bigger than him. And not only will it be someone bigger than him, but it's someone who has experience wearing boxing gloves. Do not forget that Alex Pereira is one of the best kickboxers to have ever lived. And that's where his career started, not UFC, not mixed martial arts. So let's be clear on that. But long story short, guys, I think Jake Paul's here for the long haul. I think he's going to keep calling people out strategically. I'm looking at the UFC 304 card here, and look, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Jake Paul versus Paddy Pimblett or Jake Paul versus Bobby Green one day. Like, those fights make sense to me because I think Jake Paul bests those guys, because those guys are not boxers, but they have a name. They have some level of respect. And as long as Jake Paul is counting them out, he's only gaining a little bit more and more credibility, more and more and more. And there's going to be a time where the real big names want him. And that is when Jake Paul won. Regardless of how the fight goes, Jake Paul wins because he solidifies himself as a serious contender. And I think we all hate it. Let me know what you think, guys. I'm the MMA Casual. Be sure to follow.